This is the CZ P-01 I just picked up. The idea with this gun is that it's going to be another option, a larger, more comfortable option than my Hellcat or my Ruger LCP Max for concealed carry, IWB, appendix, or strong side. I've already put a Streamlight TLR7A on it. This is a great little compact light. I got Lok Grips on it. Any gun of mine that has grip panels that can be swapped out, I always put G10 on them. And I almost always go with Lok Grips. This is their cross-cut design, and it's like their medium aggressive kind of design for concealed carry. So if I'm carrying it, it's not aggressive to the point that it'll scratch up my supple man belly. So moving forward, the upgrades and changes I'm going to be making to this pistol are kind of with that concealed carry in mind. As with all my hammer-fired CZ pistols, they get a whole bunch of Cajun Gun Works bits in them. This stuff over here is the standard package for their decockers. It has a reduced power trigger return spring that I won't be installing because that makes the reset mushy, and I don't like that on a defensive pistol. It comes with an 11.5 pound and 13 pound mainspring. The 11.5 pound is too light for defensive use. And so I will have the 13 pound and then also this 15 pound one I bought separately to tailor the single action trigger pull weight to my liking. I'm shooting for right at 4 pounds. Another thing that will help me tailor this single action trigger pull to my liking is I have a reduced power firing pin block spring, and the kit comes also with an extra heavy firing pin block spring. So this will also affect the weight of only the single action, as the firing pin safety block gets actuated right before the break of the single action. I got their stainless steel guide rod because the one that comes in the gun is plastic. And then I got a Cajun Gun Works trigger that has over travel and pre-travel adjustment screws in it as well. Let's go ahead and get an idea of the factory trigger action and weight. The double action is heavy. It's probably 10 pounds. It maxes out my 9-pound scale. Of course, if you drop the hammer using the decocker, like you're going to put it into concealment, it's going to drop it to the safety catch, not all the way down. So here's your double action pull from the safety catch. There's a bit of light take up. You hit the wall, starts cocking it, and then drops the hammer. Like I said, heavy, probably about 10 pounds. It's got some staginess to it, but overall it's pretty smooth. Single action, take up, nice defined wall, little bit of creep, and then a crisp break. Your reset. Little bit long, but not terrible. Definitely shorter than an Omega trigger system. There's a lot less creep in this trigger than an Omega trigger as well. And then there's your over travel. So the factory trigger action on this is really pretty nice. And let's see what the single action weight is. 5 pounds. 5 pounds. Just under 5 pounds. So a couple things I like to do on my hammer-fired CZ pistols. This is the slide stop, and obviously you have to push this through from the other side to take the pistol down and field strip it. So I like to break the edges right here on this little channel so that instead of having to kind of smack this from this side with the magazine base plate to get it started, I can just barely push it out with one finger. You know, working the slide, the barrel unlocking seemed to be a little bit kind of sticky and gritty feeling. So I went ahead with a stone and went over these surfaces right here of the barrel locking area, and then I took some 1000 grit sandpaper, rolled it up, and did this to it. In that little locking channel that controls the barrel unlocking and locking. Obviously it's linkless, but this is what controls the barrel unlocking as the slide comes backwards and it interfaces with the slide stop right here. So I like to smooth all that up as well. So while I have the barrel out, went ahead and put a little polish on that feed ramp there. It's not needed, this thing fed fine, but I had it out, quick and easy to do, whatever. One thing I was debating doing on this gun was installing a Cajun Gun Works hard chrome barrel bushing like I did on my Shadow 2, and that just completely eliminates the play between the barrel and the barrel bushing at lockup. This one has a little bit, but it's really minimal, and for the application of this gun and what the requirements for the accuracy would be close range in a defensive application, it doesn't really make sense to spend the money to get that increase in mechanical accuracy for this pistol. The Cajun Gun Works barrel bushings are awesome. Highly recommend them if you're looking to take play out of that lockup. But for this, it just didn't make sense to me, so I saved the $70 or whatever it is. This is nothing that wouldn't happen with the gun in about another, 200 to 300 rounds or something, but the poly coat they put on these slides does add a little bit of thickness, and it can kind of gum up these rails. So just to make this whole thing smoother, I'm going to get some like medium lapping compound, and I just take a Q-tip, rub it on the slide rail area on both sides, and I'm going to work the slide back and forth in the frame and go ahead and lap it in and smooth all that out. Just going to do this a couple hundred times, let that grittiness in there do what it needs to do, take down high spots and smooth everything out. This is the mainspring plug that goes in the bottom of the grip right here. It had a lanyard loop on it. Cajun Gun Works sells these without the lanyard loops, but they weren't in stock at the time I placed my order. So I just went ahead, hacked it off with a Dremel, and then did some file work and cold blued it. Now it's soaking in some oil, thinking about what it did. And the idea that, A, I'm not going to use a lanyard loop. B, this right here is where the pistol will print if you're concealed carrying it, especially like 4 o'clock strong side or something. So with regards to that, I didn't want the lanyard loop sticking out. Here is the new trigger installed on the trigger bar, and there is a slave pin that Cajun Gun Works provides with their floating trigger pin kit that makes installation a lot easier, so that's nice. So there's the trigger return spring, and again, this is the factory one. I'm not putting the reduced power trigger return spring in here because I do not like how mushy it makes the reset. Another thing I've done is I've ran a stone over this face and this face of the trigger bar as those slide in contact with the inside of the frame. And then I also put a little polish with some 1000 and 2000 grit sandpaper over these two little tangs right here where the slide rides on to disconnect the trigger bar. So in addition to the over travel and pre-travel adjustment on this trigger, the profile is a little bit flatter than the trigger that comes with the pistol. I think they call this like the recurve trigger, and it has a tendency to squish your finger fat and pinch your finger fat while you're pulling it down there because it's got such an aggressive curve on it. So getting everything cleaned up here and polished, I got a nice polish on the Sear face there, so that's good to go. And this is the Cajun Gun Works hammer, and this hook right here. So on this normal non-decocker models, the hammers have 2 hooks. This one, due to the decocker linkage being over here, only has 1 hook. And now that's going to make it really difficult to polish, because if there's 2 hooks, you can bridge your stone across them right here and help keep it straight this way and this way. So normally I would be polishing Sear hooks or the hammer hook here, but I'm going to leave it alone on this because it's only on one side and it's so small. I don't want to round that off or change the angle on it and render the gun unsafe. One other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back together, and I have 2 different hammer spring weights to try, and I have different springs for the firing pin safety block in the slide. I'll figure out which setup I like in terms of pull weight on the single action, and then whichever main spring I pick, I will polish the ends of it before I reassemble. Here's the Sear cage for this guy, and these faces right here, I knocked down the high spots, put a bit of a polish on them. The trigger bar rides underneath these, and the top surface of the back of the trigger bar actually slides on these faces right here. So that's another way to clean up the trigger pull on these guys. Alright, got everything back together on this. After playing musical springs, I figured out the combination that got the single action trigger pull right at about 4 pounds where I wanted it. It is the 15-pound mainspring, and I polished the ends of that. And then for the firing pin block safety spring, I used the factory one, not the reduced power one that came with the Cajun Gun Works kit. I also found that the little set screw right there that would adjust pre-travel on this trigger, there was no way I could have it in there and have the double action completely reset, so I just took it out, and that's fine, not a big deal. I have over travel adjusted to the point where I feel comfortable with it. You know, on a defensive application gun, I'm not going to adjust as much over travel out of there as I would on, say, a competition or range use gun. So trigger is really, really nice. Really happy with how it came out. The double action is still probably about 9 pounds. It's just kind of registering on my gauge, and of course it's still kind of heavy, but that's because I went with a 15-pound mainspring. But let's check this single action trigger pull. Right at 4 pounds. Right at 4 pounds. So got the single action trigger pull exactly where I wanted it. Nice defined wall, very crisp break, minimal over travel, a lot less creep, and the reset is very short and very positive. Of course, I didn't throw that reduced power trigger return spring in there because I just don't like running those. It makes my reset mushy. So this is really, really good. And then if we decock it, the double action is very smooth. Decocker action is a lot smoother as well because I polished up some of those components in there that make this operate, so it's a lot easier to run the decocker lever now. This is definitely the most difficult trigger system of the CZ hammer fired pistols to work on. I've done tons of work on polymer and metal frame Omegas. I've done lots of work on my Shadow 2, which is the conventional manual safety trigger system, but it doesn't have a firing pin safety block. Cajun Gun Works sells a slave pin for putting back the decocker Sear cage, putting it together before you put it in the gun, and you absolutely need that. So if you're going to work on this, definitely get the decocker slave pin. It's going to help you out. Of course, the reason I went with this over the P-01 Omega is that this is going to produce such a better trigger action and trigger pull than an Omega pistol. Obviously, the benefit of the Omega trigger system is that it's convertible between a decocker and a manual safety, but for the application of this gun, and in my opinion, any double single action semi-automatic pistol used for a defensive application should only have a decocking lever. It should not have a manual safety. So I know I wanted a decocking lever. I was never going to run it with a manual safety, so I didn't care about that convertibility. So that also informed my decision to buy this standard P-01. I still haven't gotten an IWB holster for this, so let me know what your recommendations are for an IWB Kydex holster for this guy. Obviously one that accommodates the TLR7 light. I do plan on sending this into Cajun Gun Works to get the slide milled for a Hollow Sun EPS, but who knows when that'll get done. That's another reason I left these sights alone. If I was keeping iron sights on this for defensive purposes, I probably would have gotten a high-vis tritium front at very least. But since I plan on milling it for an optic, I just left the sights the way they are because they will end up being backup sights. Really happy with how it came out. This thing is nasty, and this is going to be a really really great concealed carry gun. This is the best shooting and most comfortable compact pistol I've ever fired. Of course, the recoil is a little bit snappier than a polymer frame compact pistol because the aluminum frame doesn't flex under recoil in your hand like a polymer frame will, but it's still extremely controllable and extremely pleasant to shoot.